Good afternoon, and welcome to the first ever Women in Finance Fellowship panel. My name is Sue Perez. I'm Deputy Treasurer for the Commonwealth Debt Management Department, and I'm Executive Director for the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust. I want to start by thanking this extraordinary group of panelists we have today, and they'll be our co-hosts. And I want to thank all the participants. We had over 113 registered today, and I'm so excited for them to be taking part in the event. I'm excited. You're gonna hear from some very empowering women and learn about this fantastic program that Treasurer Goldberg started. Before I introduce the panelists, there's a few housekeeping items that we want to go over. Today's agenda is going to be the introductions. Then we will hear from Treasurer Goldberg. We're going to have a discussion with the panelists. And then we're hoping we'll have plenty of questions to answer from the participants in the audience. And then we will wrap it up and close the webinar. We would like to take a minute to tell you a little bit about the Office of Economic Empowerment. This is a department within the State Treasurer's Office. They are tasked with supporting, advocating, and facilitating policies that empower all Massachusetts residents. Its programs serve women, families, high school students, veterans, and seniors, and its priorities include closing the wage gap, increasing access to financial education, improving college affordability, and investing in STEM careers and education. This Zoom webinar will be recorded. The recording may be uploaded onto a public website for future use. And this webinar is also being streamed live on Facebook. Any information shared through the question function will be anonymous. Please note, however, that the chat record is subject to the public records law and as such is not anonymous. I would like to thank our partners at Ernst & Young and People's United Bank for this webinar today. And let me introduce some of our panelists today. So one of the first members is Sophia Q, who is currently an analyst at Credit Suisse. She's a graduate from Babson College, and she is an alumni of the Women in Finance Fellowship Program. In fact, she was in the first group that participated in the program, and she was in my department serving as the fellowship. So we will hear from her and her experience with this program. I'll also add that she is a great advocate for the program and has encouraged many she went to school with to participate in the program as well. Next is Deborah Kammer-Hines. Deborah is a principal in the government and public sector practice of Ernst & Young and serves a variety of roles with the federal. For each of these panelists, the more detailed background on each one is shown on the slides, and you can also see it on the details of the webinar. And last but not least is our panelist, Grace Lee, who is the Senior Vice President and Director of Government Banking and Finance at People's United Bank. Previously, Grace was General Counsel and First Deputy Treasurer of the Commonwealth. We will be joined shortly by Treasurer Goldberg, who's going to be a very key part of the conversation today as well. She's the one who created this Women in Finance Fellowship and is going to tell us what went into and what the background was and coming up with that program. Here's some background on it a little bit. It was debuted in 2016. It's the first of its kind, sponsored by a government organization. And I can tell you, I know nationally, both the Office of Economic Empowerment as well as the Treasurer have spoken about this program across the country at various panels, and I believe others have incorporated similar ones in their own states. The purpose of the program is to identify and foster female talent for the financial industry, build a network and a pipeline for women in finance, and to be an advocate for placement of women in leadership roles. You'll hear some of our panelists talk about this as well, about how important a network, a pipeline, and really just exposure to some of the careers that are available in finance are to women in this field. The Women in Finance Fellowship includes a public-private partnership with Ernst & Young, well known for its dedication to diversity and positive workplace culture. E&Y will provide female private sector advisor to each of the fellows for additional guidance, networking, and mentorship. And that's some of the really wonderful things about this program is not only do you get partnered with a department, there's also a lot of other activities that's put on and different field trips, we would call them, but it would be to places like the People's Bank. Ernst & Young does a session with them. There's a resume session. There's an interviewing session. So a lot of great skills can be acquired from this. And I think Sophia will tell us a little bit more about it too when we ask her some questions. Okay, before we get on to some of the questions for our panelists, we are going to launch a poll to try to get a sense of who is in our virtual audience. So I think, Christine, you can launch that. Oh, here it is. Okay. So if people could just take a minute to respond to this, and then we'll have the results up. We just want to get a sense on the background of everybody on it. I would like to say too, as we go through, we're going to ask some targeted questions to the panelists, hear from each of them. But if at any time during this webinar, if any questions do come up, please enter them into the Q&A section of this webinar. And then we will hope to get to those questions before we're over. So just a few more minutes if people can fill out the poll. All right. Okay. Let's see. Okay. All right. So we got the results of which of the following applies. So we can see a lot want to learn more about a career in finance. There's a good number that's contemplating applying for the fellowship, which is great. There's a third of the members currently work in finance, which is great. And there's some that would like to, a good 31% would love to use the position or learn ways to use their position to promote women in finance. So that's great. Okay. Oh, and I do see that we have, I'm going to turn it over for a few minutes to Treasurer Goldberg, who has joined us, and she's going to give us talk a little bit about why she created the Women in Finance Fellowship and a little bit about the alumni survey that had gone out earlier this year. Good afternoon, Treasurer.
Good afternoon. Sorry, I was a few minutes late. And you need to give me one little extra second because what I had to read off of in terms of the survey came in with all sorts of tracks on it. So I asked people to just resend it to me. All right, then. So I apologize for being late, and I'm very, very excited to have you all here. Just getting a little resumed. Okay. Well, first I want to talk to you very quickly about the Women in Finance Fellowship. Before I became treasurer, one of the things that was critically important to me was expanding opportunities for women and for people of color. I myself know very, very well that we have lots of qualified people out there, and yet organizations over and over again say things such as, gee, we would like to have more women and more people from diverse backgrounds, but we simply cannot find them. And I said, gee, that's really interesting, because when I graduated law school in 1983, my law school class was actually 51% women. That was Boston College. And maybe it's that the Jesuits were ahead of their time by making sure that opportunity was available to, with 51% of the population being women, I guess it should be 51% of their incoming class. I did experience in Harvard Business School, though, that there were quotas. Only 24% of the class needed to be women, and even less people of color. However, if you compound that, which I explained to folks under the treasurer's office and elsewhere, you get years and years and years of more and more qualified people who are completely capable and willing and interested in joining organizations. So with intention, at the beginning of my transition and all the way into to today, we looked at different areas. And what we noted in particular, that the financial services, Wall Street type jobs, and the like were extraordinarily difficult for women to break through, even when they were incredibly qualified. What shocked me at my 25th or 30th reunion at Harvard Business School is so many of the women who were there with me felt that the playing field was level and that they would excel and succeed based upon their qualifications and talents. So many of them shared the barriers that got in their way, to the point that many of them lateraled out, went to smaller firms, tried to start their own businesses. And I thought, what a shame. We are allowing a certain type to dominate areas of our economy where the results and the economic opportunities are enormous. And what we found, that if you can create opportunity, but also place a mentoring piece into the program and help people understand that keep your eye on the prize, and no matter what barriers that come in your way, work your way around them, break through them, but stay the course. Don't let them get you down. And I felt very strongly that we look at our offices here in the treasurer's office, and we have a lot of women leaders that can be supportive, that can talk about their experiences, and can talk about barriers that even can be created by yourself. I'll give you an example that I share with women at times. That I was in my 40s. I ran for office the first time to be a select person in the town of Brookline, not state treasurer. I worked my butt off to win. And the next morning, before I went to go get sworn in, I turned to my father and I said, Daddy, do I know how to do this job? Now you're talking to a woman in her 40s, married with 2 kids, Harvard MBA, BC Law School, worked at Stop and Shop, was helping run nonprofit organizations. All of us hold that within ourselves. When I decided to run for treasurer at 60, I still had to, what I call, hold my nose and jump off the high dive. There are cultural barriers, and they have affected us. And for all of you to be able to hear that even I feel that way at times, I think should explain that your feelings are legitimate, but there are ways to overcome them. And so that's the idea behind the Women in Finance Fellowship. And anything and everything that we have to do to be supportive, we will be, including when you need to consult us in the future. So I think that up on the screen, oh, I see that. Oh, Grace Lee, are you on here now?
I am on here now.
Well, there you go. I did not realize you were joining us this quickly. So I want everyone to know that one of the people who convinced me that I could be treasurer is Grace Lee. So raise your hand. Shout out to Grace Lee, who Grace Lee once upon a time was first deputy, and I think also general counsel of the state treasurer's office. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. That is.
And am I exaggerating that you were one of the people who truly convinced me to run?
I have to say that I absolutely will take that, because I did. And I thought, when you questioned yourself that indeed, if someone as skilled and as talented as yourself suffers from, imposter syndrome, then we got a lot of work to do. But I have to say that a more qualified treasurer from Massachusetts I have never seen. So, exceptional job, Madam Treasurer.
Well, thank you, Grace. So before we move on to this fabulous panel, and of course I'm calling them fabulous because look what Grace just said about me. No. Grace is fabulous, as are all our panelists. I want to just go over quickly our Women in Finance results. And we had an 83% response rate. 83, that is enormous. And so 65% of our respondents said they did not know anyone in finance before the fellowship. Now that is important because having been through our program, we have really moved women into this sphere. And 80% are mentoring other women within their college setting, workplace, or the community. Most of the respondents said the program influenced their academic and career choices, and half stay in touch with their mentors. And that is also very critical because trust me, you're going to hit wall after wall after wall, and having a mentor help you along really makes a difference. In fact, Sue Perez may not admit it, but I had to mentor her to take the role she's in today. And I did it I didn't go play golf with the guys. I cornered Sue in the ladies' room. True story. So sometimes women have to use our own devices since we're stereotyped as needing to go to the ladies' room together. Well, we went together and she walked out being a head of debt and ultimately a deputy, one of our deputies in the treasurer's office. So there you go. Had to take it. Believe me, I wasn't letting her out of that ladies' room. As what, by the way, Grace, if you didn't know that story, it's true. It was during transition. And then as one of our fellows put it, it helped me see the role of mentor, and the discussion we had with various industry professionals helped me get a better understanding of being a woman in finance. And then another fellow said, the program has greatly impacted my career choices. I learned during the fellowship on a daily basis during my full-time position, everything that I am using today. So I think that the program is successful. We were, of course, saddened we couldn't do it this summer during COVID, because so many pieces of it are one-on-one mentoring and also group get-togethers with the women out in the financial services community who are working with us and have volunteered their time in many cases to support the program. It is a really unique public-private partnership with Ernst & Young, and fellows have been mentored at the treasurer's office, but also at Ernst & Young, which gives perspective on understanding the public sector versus the private sector. And candidly, sometimes there are harder knocks in the private sector that you have to learn to combat, because actually the financial rewards are much larger. And so consequently, not to put down any white males, but a lot of the white males controlling the purse strings are less likely to want to give them up. So we're really hopeful that we can have a fellowship next summer. We will keep our website updated and if we don't, trust me, the minute we can get this fellowship going again, we are going to. I'm going to turn it over to Sue, who will start the conversation with the panelists. Sue, take it away. And anybody who wants to ask me a question, I do read the chat.
Well, thank you, Treasurer. I think your enthusiasm for this program is great. It is a great program. I have participated in it from the get-go. We look forward to having a fellow in our departments. And I think I've said this before, but we learn as much from the fellows as I think the fellows can learn from us. And it is a great program. But let's jump over to the panelists, and we're going to ask each of them a question. And then, I encourage other panelists to jump in if we have comments on some of them, and Treasurer, you as well on some of the questions too. So, Grace, we're going to start with you. Can you talk about an obstacle or a challenge of being a woman in a male-dominated career, or mainly male-dominated career?
Right, and you know, I have to say that this kind of dovetails very well with the Treasurer was saying, because you know, I was at the state treasury. I was general counsel and first deputy. And in that platform, you intersect with the financial institutions regularly. And thematically, most of my career, I've tended to be the only female at the table and usually the only person of color. And so what you tend to see is people like to default into stereotypes. So for women, they're gonna want to kind of assess where you belong. They want to put you in a little box, right? So either they see you as being, oh, this is this soccer track mom, right? The soccer mom track, or you have this career professional that's willing to sacrifice their family. But the truth of the matter is we're neither one of those, and we're all of those, because we're managing both, and it depends on what phase in your life you're in. So I've had the, you know, fortune to work in great offices with great people. With those opportunities, obviously come obstacles when I'm placed in a situation like that. There's little themes that come out, and I think consistently for a female and an Asian female, the automatic default, you know, lever is passive, quiet, let's ignore. And so I think that tends not to work with me, only because, you know, I'm an attorney by trade and a middle child. And what often happens is once they interact with the individual and not the stereotype, you're able to navigate that. But I'm not going to say that it's not without its challenges to get out of that box, because people are going to want to place you into that box. From outrageous comments from when I was in the DA's office that are completely misogynistic, to being at meetings at, you know, the prim board where I was legitimately ignored because I was the only female there. If I could have worked in your office, Madam Treasurer, it would have been a completely different world. But what tends to
yes, it would have.
No, I mean, times change as well as landscapes. And I have to say, even now, as I kind of navigate my career now, and I run a business line at People's United Bank, the default mechanism, and this people aren't trying to be malicious, but what you'll see is, you know, you get pigeonholed to, oh, she's on the mommy track, so, you know, she doesn't want the, you know, high profile, and this goes for law firms too, cases, and or you default into she's willing to sacrifice her family. As an associate, I was held as a standard because when I went into labor with my first child, while I was in labor and delivery, I was outlining depositions on the gurney as, you know, I was waiting to have my kids. They thought that was the greatest thing in the world. That is awful, right? But they revere that standard because this is a woman that was going to sacrifice everything for her profession. Likewise, you know, you fast forward into finance, and, you know, I've taken great pains to make sure that, you know, while my job in the past, but pre-pandemic required a lot of travel. And I took great pains to make sure that my home life, my children, and my family's life operates very smoothly. That includes meals, housekeeping, et cetera, et cetera. So when people hear that, they automatically assume that you're a bad mother, right? But you're a great employee, But the truth of the matter is, no, you're a great mom because you make sure things are taken care of. So I think, you know, I know you asked for one, but the truth of the matter is, I'm sure that everyone on this panel has several examples of the obstacles they've come across, from blatantly misogynistic, ranging to just microaggressions that, while may not, you know, be intended to be malicious, they still have a nefarious net impact. Hopefully I answered your question, Sue.
Yeah, no, that
Which
was,
is why I knew the treasurer when she questioned herself, and I said, oh no, I've worked with these people. You totally got this. So, you know, we women, we suffer from imposter syndrome. We do. And it's something that, you know, I hope that we raise the next generation to kind of get over, because it really is insidious.
no, I think, thank you for your answer, Grace. I think those were great points, because I think,
Oh, we're losing Sue.
you know, I look to hopefully raising my daughter to, you know, oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me or no? Okay.
Yep, we got you.
I think the great point that you brought up, okay, is the difference between, you know, you can be a good mother or you can be a good employee, but you can be both. I think it's a lot of times convincing ourselves that we can be both, as well as convincing the people challenge. And I'm glad you brought that. I think that's one I know I wrestle with a lot. And, you know, COVID has made a lot of it a lot more obvious to a lot more people. And, you know, hopefully something good's going to come out of it with a better balance on some of that as well. Okay, so moving over to Deborah. Deborah, what are some strategies, resources, and tools that women in or looking to get into a financial career can use?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Sue, because, you know, when I was considering the list ahead of time, I thought, you know, the way that I got into a career in finance isn't the way you would today get into a career in finance. Some of those things are still true, but we have other access to tools that didn't exist way back when. But I mean, firstly, I reached out to my college professors and grad school professors for networking ideas and suggestions for internships. And that was one way I had a chance to try out doing some finance ahead of, you know, making that giant leap. But today there are ways, so many podcasts exist, and college career offices have information, and LinkedIn is such a great source. And in particular, while we're all home during this, or most of us are mostly home during this pandemic, you know, so much more time. Like Grace, I spent a tremendous amount of time traveling pre-pandemic, and now have that extra time, if you will, where I'm way more accessible. So when folks reach out through networks and LinkedIn, I have the time to connect with them and spend a few minutes to help guide or point in the right direction, or a direction. I'm not sure if it's right, but those are some of the ways that I think today we have some additional tools that maybe didn't exist.
Great answer on that. And again, any of the other panelists, if you have anything to chime in on any of these questions, you can feel free to do that. I'm going to move to Sophia. Sophia, what impact did the Women in Finance Fellowship Program have on you and your career trajectory?
Thanks, Sue. I would have to say that this question is two-part, and I've given it some thought since I was asked to do the panel. The first part of my question is just blatantly, this is what caused me to try a career in finance to begin with. My freshman year in college, I had no idea what I really wanted. I had done well in some accounting classes, and all I knew is that I wanted to try to have some work experience that summer. And dealing with all the subject matter that I was instantly presented for the first time really opened my eyes to what really finance is. And I remember having a million questions for you and Kathy Bromledge over at Debt Services also. She showed me my first Bloomberg terminal, which now I use just constantly all day. You guys really taught me like what even like debt and bonds and anything like that were to begin with. So genuinely, that really just kickstarted my career. And that fall is when I applied to all the programs that ended up landing my job that I have now. So there's that part. And then the second part is the whole women in finance part / mentorship part of it, because I think I grew up in a more privileged background where I played a lot of sports, and I had parents that always told me I could do whatever I set my mind to. And I always saw my guy friends in school and at soccer camps and didn't see myself any different from them. But then going to a business school and all of a sudden wanting to enter in this field that is male dominated, it never clicked with me until this experience at the fellowship, the disconnect between men and women, I guess, in this field. And I remember very vividly accompanying yourself and the team at Debt Services to a presentation with some of your investors. And I was the last one to enter the room behind you guys. And I looked around and was immediately floored because the entire room was men. And it was just you standing at the front giving a presentation to all these men. And we walked in early in the morning and everybody was talking and having side conversation, and you commanded the room to such an extent that really had an impact on myself. And so just moving forward, I'm really grateful for that experience, to have had the opportunity to see somebody that I would be able to look up to be able to command a room of men in this industry to that extent. And I'm also grateful that I went into my career with that mindset, because I think that having the confidence to know your place in the room, in the sense that you have a place in that room and you deserve that voice at the conference room table, was a valuable takeaway going into my career.
A great response. Good. And I think Sophia was part of, we would also have banks come in and visit us while she was there. And we usually have our fellow just participate in whatever we're doing. And I think you could probably comment on all the banks that came in to visit us as well. There might have been one other female across the table from us, but for the most part, the bank's staff is mostly male as well. And that's truly a reflection, that again, what the treasurer was, and is it they don't open it to them, or are they not interested, or the barriers and the challenges that Grace talked about keeping them from it? So that's great to hear from you, Sophia, the effect of the program. And I will say Sophia is also one of the big champions of this program as well. I think every follow-up fellow that I interviewed with to come in and join with us somehow knew Sophia too. So
Can I just go back to the last question, because just following up on what Sophia was saying, strategies and kind of navigating that. I think, Sophia, you hit upon something that I love the fellowship, because we have in the past had the group of fellows come and talk to us. And I said this in the past before, and it has to do with when you walk into a room in any environment where you're the one person that does not look like everybody else, you will stand out. And so while at first blush, it is a bit intimidating, but you also have to kind of use that as a strength, because remember, what you do will be remembered, because you will not blend. And so this is a huge opportunity. And it's, and I say that tentatively, because it is also very intimidating. But, I always say, I have, when you look at strategies for kind of developing yourself in the workplace, especially in a male dominated workplace, I always say, make sure you have like 3 things. You need to solidly have 3 things. You need allies. So when you walk into a room, know the audience, and you need allies, and it has to be both male and female. If you only seek female allies, that's not that big of a safety net, because there's not enough of us. Right? So yeah. when you're networking, there are great men out there, right? And all you have to do is ask, and they're more than happy to mentor you. They're more than happy to help you with your career. So you need an ally walking in through that door. The other thing you need is you need to know your business. When you walk in, you need to know your audience, you need to know your material, because they will remember you. They will remember you for your mistakes, and they will remember you for your accomplishments. So, people, I used to tell people when I drive, if I have to do a presentation, I say it out loud so muscle memory takes over, because then they just think I'm singing in the car, right? But I say it out loud, I repeat myself and I repeat myself because I want it to go very smoothly, because I know 9 times out of 10, and I'm Korean, just know that, they always say, oh yeah, it's that Chinese girl, because I'm the only person in that room that looks like me. So you got to make sure you know your materials. Just because you have allies doesn't mean that you can, shortchange your competency.
Yeah.
And the last thing that you hit on, Sophia, is that confidence. And I always say, have that person in your life. If you don't have one, seek them out and find one. It could be a best friend, it could be a partner, it could be a husband, wife, it could be, for me, it was my father, where they thought you walked on water. They had so much faith in you that you remember that on those moments where you lack that confidence, and you borrow from their well, right? So I would say those 3 things will serve you very, very well.
Yeah, and I want to just add on, because Grace, I think that was really well said, is that the flip side of these challenges is an opportunity. And so when you figure out how to convert that and to use your voice, which is a different voice in the room and needs to be heard, and remember that you're expressing a point of view that the rest of the audience needs to hear, then you can say it more confidently, because you're doing everyone who's going to come behind you and with you a favor. Right? So do it on behalf of others, which is something that women like to do.
Although I want to add in, beware of the queen bee. There are some women, not as many today, but when I was first starting out, that had been used to being the woman, who found younger women or new women threatening. And their attitude was, I toughed it out and I made it. Why should I be mentoring you? And so I found strategies to make them, help them understand that I acknowledged the barriers they had broken. I respected them. I looked to them to share with me, even if I thought I knew the answer, and just wanted to make them feel I respected what they had accomplished. And I don't know if you'll see that as much today, but don't be surprised if you do. And so don't automatically assume that your best ally is the woman who made it. It can at times actually be that man who happens to also have 2 to 3 daughters, who has experienced what their daughters have gone through. I'll share a quick story about when I was running for office, and I was out in Winthrop at a activist event, and there was a blue collar worker there in the really a stereotype. And he looked at me, goes, so what's your issue? And I said, wage equality. And he looked at me and he said, that's my issue too. Well, candidly, you could have knocked me over with a feather at that point. I said, really? Why? I've got a wife and 3 girls. Not one of them is paid what they're worth, and I have to shoulder the burden. And I went, I'm on to something, because this is a universal issue. And so Grace is right. Look for those male allies, and they exist. I actually did a presentation last year to talk about how to develop your allies, and it includes men and women. And so I wanted to share that, because clearly in our program, our women mentors are all in, but it's a word to the wise to be looking for allies in every corner.
That's great. That was great feedback from everyone, and I'll echo that too. The male allies have to be there. I mean, we just got through saying that there's so many times you're the only woman in the room. You've got to make allies with some of the men that are in the room, and a lot of them have daughters, and so that is a great way to get through them. And unfortunately, that's the way some eyes are getting open, as well as when they actually see the impact. They may have heard it till they over and over again, but until it impacts them, it doesn't seem to resonate as much. So the next question is going to go out to all the panelists, and I'll sort of ask them in order, but it's the pandemic. So the pandemic has put additional pressure on all of us, but it has been said that women have taken on additional burdens. How do you think the pandemic will affect work culture in the long run? And do you think it will impact women in finance careers? And so maybe I can start with Deborah.
Sure, I'm glad to. So, I've heard that too, and I find it really distressing as well as the mother of a daughter as well. So, I always think about it through that lens. And I've heard things like, this pandemic will set women's careers back a decade. And I think that there's also an opportunity. I think it's true. I mean, I think in the short run, there's some real challenges for women juggling work and juggling kids that are part-time home and part-time in school. I think 100% there are things that women will always shoulder, regardless of what else is going on. But I also think there's an opportunity here. What I see is more of gracious understanding from my male colleagues who now are home and witnessing what goes on, right? So there's more of this blurring of the line between work and home life where, there's some of it peaks in a way that's unexpected, but there's at least, where with the people I'm working with, there's a lot of understanding and compassion. And my hope is that as we come out of this pandemic, when we come out of this pandemic, that we approach each other and remember what we saw struggling behind, as Grace was talking about it. Like, we show up at work and we have to be better, we have to keep some of that behind and not really show it. But there's this understanding now of how we got there and what were the 17 things that happened before people got out the door in the morning, and that we show that compassion to each other, right? And that we will imagine work differently in the future. I think we will return to an office. I think people are tired of home dining room tables and working next to Zoom classrooms. But I do think we'll go back, but we'll show each other more flexibility and understanding. So, and I do think, in the CFOs that I've spoken to, Sue, who run large finance organization, since there's an understanding that there is a portion of work that really can be done remotely. So for those who seek out that kind of work, I think there'll be more opportunity coming out of the pandemic than before.
Great.
Yeah, I think, you see a lot of studies. I think there was an article, they did some research and publications, academic publications for women plummeted 80%. Their productivity diminished by 80%, the men's increased, right? Likewise, you saw, I think it was the Wall Street Journal article that Deborah was talking about. You're talking about a women's recession. This is going to put women in the workplace back 10 years, a decade. And the struggle is real. The struggle is real. We balance, women, we balance so well. And there is a very, very, delicate balance from having everything work to having everything fall apart. So, I can tell you right now, I've never done so much laundry, cooked and cleaned my entire life. I have to say that, it takes everything. I'm less accessible because we have remote learning going on. We coordinate, and this might not happen in every household, but in my household, I'm the academic coordinator, I'm the athletic coordinator, I am the domestic manager, I am the chef, I am the cleaner. And, once upon a time, I had, I had a nanny that helped us. The pandemic kind of took that out. This was a full-time FTE. You think about that in your domestic life and in your professional life. If you have a staff and you get a position eliminated, somebody has to pick up that workload. I'm talking in a full-time FTE that I've assumed on top of my already full-time job. So the struggle is real. And I have to say, I kind of joke about it, but I have a lot of resources. So, I don't know what people are doing that don't have resources. So I have no doubt that this will have a profound impact, because regardless of where you are in life, if you have responsibilities at home, they still need to get taken care of. And so for, our transition back into reentry, that's going to be a struggle, because whether it's, you or your partner, if you have children, that reentry is going to be excessively challenging, because you have to navigate the hybrid model of school. Sometimes they're in school, sometimes they're not in school. Now, where I live, they're flip-flop being how many days they're actually in school. So, I have to say the struggle is real. And I think that, it's not just the finance industry. I think everybody's seeing it. There's a disproportionate impact of the domestic life that's carried on the shoulders of women. And it's rearing its head now in a very profound way that will have an impact in our workforce. And hopefully, as we evolve through this pandemic, we'll have more resources to remedy that. But, we'll have to see, which is why networking and these opportunities for these presentations are so important, because you have to make sure that women continue to stay engaged, women continue to network, even in a remote setting, because we don't have the luxury of let's go grab lunch, let's go have coffee. So we all need to sign up for all these networking events and presentations and panels, even if you do have Zoom fatigue.
I just want to add to that, because Grace, even though I didn't have kids who had to go to school in a hybrid model or remote, as you know, I'm the treasurer of the state. I am also president of all the treasurers of the country and treasurers, and that includes territories. And we were highly impacted by the financial challenges of COVID. So I had to convene them on a weekly basis and work together with them and learn how to cook, because there was no cooking gene in my family. I got great at cleaning toilets, vacuuming, ordered a floor steamer to keep the floors clean, take care of the dog on a full-time basis. And our daughter had moved back into the house, but she was working on Zoom. And so doing all these things, and had a very sick parent, as you are aware of. So although I didn't have the kids on the remote, I had the very sick father but one of the things that I, as Deborah said, and Taylor, who is one of the attendees, said challenges equal opportunities. Number one, I got an Instapot and I got a grill. And so I now know how to do these things and actually enjoy them. But also, we, again, as women, prove how strong we are, because we are. And in fact, I'm about to respond to Taylor that adversity gives us strength. And that's one of the things about staying the course and not letting them get in your way. One of the things my dad said to me, and my mom was one of my greatest mentors. She was in the 70s, one of the top 10 businesswomen in America. So I had quite a fine example of accomplishment, but it's my dad who said, your mother was successful because she constantly got knocked down and picked herself up and kept on going. He said, I was the golden-haired kid, #1 in my class at Boston Latin School, had no trouble getting into 3 Ivy League colleges and Harvard Law School. Nothing was hard for me. And when life became hard, I had more trouble dealing with it. So I think that there are special qualities within most women, and I'm not going to generalize and stereotype, but if we can take the adversity and pick ourselves up and keep on going. Look, I didn't run for treasurer till I was 60 years old. I ran for lieutenant governor in 2006. I didn't win, even though Grace supported me. And instead of shutting down and forgetting about it, look where I am today. And I feel as though I'm able to not only have self-fulfillment, but to make impact on so many people's lives. And that is the best intrinsic reward I could possibly have. But if I'd let the adversity knock me down, that wouldn't have happened.
Thank you, Treasurer. That was great. We do have a couple of questions that have come in through the Q&A, so I'm gonna go to one of those. So here's a question: how do all of you deal with the macro and micro inequities when you are not treated the same as your male peers? So I don't know. Grace, do you want to take that one?
You know, you broke up on my end right in the middle of the question, so I was hoping that you went to somebody else. Can you repeat that?
I can read it. I have it in front of me. How do you all deal with the micro and macro inequities when you're not treated the same as your male peers? Okay.
So on that one, the macros, let's deal with the micros, because the micro, in my opinion, the micros are harder to manage because there's slights that most people, if it's not directed at you, wouldn't notice. So I've always found that for me, I use humor, I use humor because I think you can say a lot and you can say it in a non-offensive manner by calling people out in a very soft way. If there's somebody that talks about, for example, oh, well, can't you get somebody to do that at home, or, because there might be a project or something that they're asking you to stay late for, and this is in a different venue, my response was, oh, I'm so sorry. At my house, I am the wife. And, and what I need is a wife. So if you could find me a wife to take care of me and my family, I'd be happy to help with you on that project. But I really do got to go because I get penalized and I have to pay when I'm late. So, those are, and I say the micros because, you don't want to make anyone feel bad. But you also want to make sure that you diffuse the situation so it doesn't actually happen again. On the macro level, and it depends on how systemic and how bad that is. I mean, if it is blatantly, if it's blatantly illegal, then clearly you need to talk to your HR department, your supervisor, if it's not your supervisor, and whatnot, because that's not okay. So it depends on the situation. I've always stood by that three, that three criteria, mantra of you have your allies, you know your stuff, and you borrow from confidence when you don't have it. And in any situation, your allies, and if you choose wisely, will help you navigate both the micro and the macro, especially when those allies have a genuine interest in your success. What you will find is, regardless if they're female or male, once you are allied with them, they have a vested interest in making sure that you're okay. So with those three, those three criterias, I feel like you can kind of navigate those. But on the macro level, if it's a real issue, I never discourage anybody from seeking assistance from HR and whatnot, because that means you have a larger cultural systemic issue. Hopefully I answered the question.
I was just going to add, I completely agree. And I love those three core things that you refer back to as a touchstone, if you will. I think that's great. I'm going to steal that from you.
I hope everybody steals it.
But I was going to add, because I think sometimes when I'm in those situations with in particular with the micro, my humor comes out as biting or sarcasm. And so I try to take a step back and ask a question. A clarifying question, because I find that sometimes if you can seek an understanding or try to ask a question in a way that gets to the core of why that micro poke was made, that you can also get someone to realize what they did, or how they said it might not have been how they intended. I mean, in giving them the benefit of the doubt, sometimes it completely was intended that way, but I think then you're calling them out in a way that, makes them realize that that was all on their own, that was completely off base. Because I struggle with my humor in those situations, Grace.
So I would like to share something that a story from my mother. This was obviously years ago, but she was interviewing for a job. And at that time, it was not illegal to ask, what will you do if you have if you get pregnant? And so her answer was, from what I understand, you're pregnant for 9 months, and then at the end you have a baby. That wasn't biting, and it was really funny. And the person interviewing her, who of course was a male, just didn't know what to say after that. So one of the techniques I learned more from observing her in a business environment than her actually telling me is a strategy of asking questions and then going around or dancing around and coming through the back door, which is the way that is, or saying to people, did you really mean to say what you said? And they'll kind of look at you like, what do you mean? And so you say something like, well, the way in which you said it was really kind of interesting. So you use words that are to the point, but not, because women will be perceived as aggressive. And I always tell people, no, it's assertive, but as aggressive, and aggressive is good in a man and not necessarily in a woman. However, once you begin achieving positions of power, then use your aggression when it is appropriate. Sue, for example, uses it very well when she is negotiating with investment bankers on what they must do on behalf of the Commonwealth. And that is perfectly correct to be doing. She also happens to be a black belt in karate, and I let people know that about her. So, and there have been times where I have been perfectly comfortable being aggressive when behavior is inappropriate, period. But those moments are, they don't happen on an ongoing basis. So that when you do use it, whereas some men are aggressive all the time, when you do use it, you make your point. And then they say, oh, so she isn't always going to be going around the back door and coming in from the other way. And I better be careful.
That's a great point. We have time for one last question, which, Sophia, this sounds like it's right up your alley. Ready? What advice would you give a young college woman looking to apply for internships or careers in the finance industry? And so I know you had a few. You did the women fellowship, but then I think you also had some internships. So can you just spend a minute and go through what advice you would give?
Sure. So I love also mentoring other women at Babson, or anybody that reaches out to my inbox has any questions as to what I did. And one of the first things I tell them is you have to apply everywhere you can imagine, do all the research you can do as to what kind of job you would be interested in, and to really put yourself out there. And I always emphasize this because there's always some sense of rejection, because women that go into the financial industry are go-getter women who are used to trying to get what they want. And sometimes rejection hurts even more. And being afraid of rejection sometimes kills your hopes from the get-go. So just put yourself out there, send all those cold emails, look into your school's alumni database and reach out to people. I know if anybody from Babson sends me an email, I'll respond right away. Well, maybe not right away, but I will for sure respond. And so do the cold calls, do the cold emails, apply to every bank, institution you could imagine. There's also this perceived notion that if I don't go to an Ivy or if I'm not from the specific target school, it's never going to happen, so I'm wasting my time. I strongly do not subscribe to that ideal. And so I think that if you don't give yourself a shot, there's no hope in the first place. And secondly, I'd say rely on mentors. And Sue included being one of my mentors, and others that I had at Babson and in finance in general. It's a very interesting industry to try to navigate. And having that advice, being what's an investment bank to begin with? What do these banks do? Like, what are their roles? Just asking those questions, being young, that's one of your best assets, is being able to ask questions and not be judged on them. Ask the dumb questions. There's no real dumb question. And being out of college and new to the industry gives you a better excuse to ask them. And I think just reach out to people and try to put yourself out there. That's the best I can do.
That's great. Thank you so much. With that,
Sophia, is your email available to the women who are on this call?
I definitely am willing to make it available. I hope it's available. Should I just write it in the chat? I could definitely do that.
Yeah, why don't you? Because I think we have a few other questions that would be very appropriate for you to answer, like how to maintain long-term mentorships and things like that. So thank you for putting it in there. Really appreciate it.
Always happy to help.
Well, we are so happy we have worked with you.
I know. Well, I think we are coming down to the 2 o'clock hour.
2:02.
And I just want to thank everyone. I think this has been a great first women panel. I think the panelists have been fantastic, and I thank them all so much for participating and sharing so many key points and, simple points, but I think really things that I know are going to resonate with me and hopefully with everybody else that participated as well. There will be an exit poll that we would ask that all the participants complete when they leave the webinar today. And then please make sure to follow the Office of Economic Empowerment on social media, and that will be where you can stay up to date on the fellowship announcements. So again, thank you to the panelists. Thank you to all the participants. Stay well and stay healthy. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.